Howdy, this here's Professor UD Guru coming to you from wherever the heck I am. I'm here to react to Caleb Howell's interesting response to Jimmy Corsetti's interesting theory that the Richat Structure in northwest Africa is the site of the lost city of Atlantis discussed by Plato. Somewhat relatedly, we moderns assume that the ancients invented their history, and we rebrand their history as myth and folklore. Myth and folklore it is in its current form, but that doesn't mean the gods and their exploits never existed. The idea that ancient people just made everything up is kind of silly, don't you think? Regarding Atlantis, both Jimmy Corsetti of Bright Insight and Caleb Howells have good videos and interesting theories, but they disagree with each other on some of the evidence that Atlantis might have been a city built on top of what is now the Richat Structure in Mauritania. I'm not going to rehash what they've already said because I think that would be boring for those of you who've seen it 1,000 times because it's so interesting, and I don't want to rehash anything. I'm going to assume that you know what I'm talking about, and if not, then see the links in the descriptions for their theories and evidence. And their movies are very, very much worth watching. So do watch their movies. In response to Caleb Howell's pushing the Greek god Atlas further and further west of Greece seems like a theory, not evidence as such. So let me just explain a little bit without rehashing the whole thing. He's saying that the god Atlas, who is the source of the word Atlantis, the god Atlas was situated just to the west of the west coast of Greece in the ocean, and then he says that as the world of the Greeks expanded to the west, then they situated the god Atlas further and further to the west. I don't consider that a logical argument. I just consider it basically a brainstorm. There's nothing wrong with theories, but personally, I believe that the term Atlantis represents a big civilization with remnants all over the world. And if there was a flood or something of that magnitude, of the magnitude needed to destroy one civilization or one culture, then it would have destroyed more than one culture. It would have destroyed cultures, advanced or otherwise, all over the world. Let's say, well, according to the energy people, the engineers, and the physicists, if Australia goes down 1,000 feet, then something else somewhere else is going to go up 1,000 feet. I mean, just, roughly speaking. I mean, what goes up must come down, or else X goes up and Y goes down, or something like that. That's just common sense and the laws of physics. But anything that causes the oceans to rise and the continents to change in shape and elevation is going to have a big impact worldwide. The word Atlas might not have Greek roots. We don't know. I don't know. Do you know? If so, what is it? I'm not talking about the name of some god, because the god Atlas has roots. We don't know maybe what those are. What are they? Seems to me like Plato thought that the Egyptians knew something about Atlas. Maybe it was an Egyptian word that sounded like Atlas, or who knows. I mean, other than being the name of a Greek god, does anybody know the roots of that name, where that name come from? Because, for example, my middle name is Scott. Well, that's a Scottish name. It means something. You can guess what it means, since S-C-O-T means a Scottish person. All right, so assuming that the smoking guns will never be found, the real god of all scientific theory is conjecture. But the gigantic ripples in the sand, or whatever they call the dirt over by the Richat Structure, those giant ripples leading through Mauritania out toward the ocean, they certainly do indicate a flood that touched the sky. There is no arguing that. Those ripples did not just end up there magically. And there's a supposedly very deep and 400-mile-long slide in the ocean just west of Mauritania, which would contain whatever used to be on top of the Richat, if anything. And knowing that there was a flood through Mauritania that touched the sky, I think it's kind of apparent that there was something on top of the Richat, whether it was just dirt or, castles in the sky or whatever, you see in the science fiction version, whatever. Something is in the ocean west of Mauritania. And did I mention that I'm saving my pennies for a Titanic-sized dredge to park off the coast of Mauritania to suck up the dirt off the bottom of the ocean, find out what's in there. I don't know why no one else is doing it, but by golly, I'm going to do it. If I live long enough, I'll do it myself. If I have to get a snorkel and swim down there with my little bucket and shovel, I'm going to dig it up myself. There is nothing that makes me more curious than that exact slide. What's under the sands of the Sahara? What's in the ocean west of Mauritania? We do have Stone Age tools on top of the Richat, which means to me that all traces of any city that might have happened to be on top of the Richat would have been washed into the ocean west of Mauritania. The survivors would still need to slice their meat, so they relearned how to make knives out of rocks and managed to stay alive. Also, in response to Caleb's videos, he states that the current Mauritania, where the Richat is located, doesn't even overlap the ancient Mauritania. And they're spelled almost the same, but not exact, which doesn't matter. He's right. This is correct. The two countries or lands do not overlap. However, he then goes on to leap to the conclusion that, therefore, the Richat can't be the location of a city lost in a flood 12,000 years ago. I don't see the chain of logic there. The fact that ancient Mauritania and modern Mauritania were not in exactly the same place, who cares? The Richat Structure is in a certain particular place. The ripples in the sand are in a certain particular place. And the fact that those two lands named Mauritania don't overlap means pretty much nothing. Too many so-called scientists, not that I'm not saying that Caleb calls himself a scientist. Maybe he does, but I don't think so. I think he's just a researcher, like Graham Hancock and stuff, and Jimmy. Too many scientists form theories based on very slim conjecture, announce their evidence or their chains of logic as if it was proof, and then proceed to build houses of cards on foundations of dogma. But in my opinion, archaeology can't be called a science until archaeologists start acting like scientists and thinking scientifically. And lacking curiosity about what's under the sands of the Sahara is absolutely not a scientific virtue. The current residents of the Atlas Mountains supposedly don't have a flood myth, which I don't necessarily believe, but it's possible, because if they were already living in the mountains, then when the flood came, it might not have had that much effect on them personally. It's more likely that they do have a flood myth, and the internet just doesn't know about it yet. Regarding the word Atlantis on ancient maps based on the writings of Herodotus, from rudimentary research I've done, it seems that the word Atlantis is a Greek word meaning of Atlas. It does not mean people of Atlas as such. It can mean that. Atlantes would be a plural referring to a people or anything that is of Atlas. Similar Greek tribal names, and this is according to Grok, so it needs to be confirmed by more research. Akamantis, I don't know how to pronounce Greek. Akamantis from Akamas, son of Theseus, and Iantis from Aias, A-I-A-S. That's, I guess, the original Greek form of the name Ajax, the hero of the Trojan War. So Akamantis from Akamas and Iantis from Aias. But this indicates that Atlantis could refer to anything that could be described as of Atlas, including a city of Atlas, an island of Atlas, a kingdom of Atlas, etc. So Atlantis, it could mean kingdoms of Atlas, the lands of Atlas, not just the peoples of Atlas. Plato or Solon could have created the word Atlantis from the word Atlas. Let's say they heard Atlas from the Egyptians, or a word similar to Atlas from the Egyptians, and they or someone who copied their manuscripts could have changed it to Atlas to make it more familiar, just as we use the English word axis with its original Greek plural axes. Solon and or Plato could have been using the Greek word Atlantis as a grammatical form, a familiar grammatical form of a foreign name known to the Egyptians, Atlas or something similar. It would be interesting to go back to the original text of Plato to try and see the context of his use of the words Atlas and Atlantis. I will try to do this, not that I'm a scholar or anything of Greek or anything else, but if anyone requests it. But chances are this analysis already exists somewhere, and if so, then please guide us to that source in the comment. The Richat Structure being 400 or 500 miles from the Atlas Mountains, that doesn't mean anything. We're talking about a great culture with a thriving capital city sitting on top of the Richat or in the Azores or wherever it was. The jurisdiction of a city of that importance would be more than several hundred miles. So the distance of the Richat from the Atlas Mountains being 400 or 500 miles or whatever it is, that's not an argument. That's illogical. We're talking about a major civilization here, not a local collection of huts. But conjecture doesn't prove or disprove things. We should be digging stuff up, not trying to prove and disprove theories. Of course, most of us, that's all we can afford to do, and that's all I can do in my chair. And if that's not interesting enough, sorry, Jimmy, I love Jimmy Corsetti's movies, and if I was young and had money, I'd be trying to travel with him on his tours of ancient sites. But as I was saying, and if that's not deep enough, I'm about to go straight off the deep end. So if you're here for science, turn off this video right now. In fact, all the ancient gods and myths could be based on real beings from otherwise forgotten civilizations. The notion that there are no forgotten civilizations is just an invented notion. There is no evidence that there are no forgotten civilizations. That's an invented idea. Why do we moderns think the ancients just invented their histories? My belief or theory, this is the part where, we're going straight off the deep end. I already warned you. My theory is that advanced beings, let's call them giants for fun, though they probably resembled well-dressed Sasquatch or Yeti, some beings created the weaker and smaller human species as slaves. You know how little chihuahuas and pug dogs were bred from wolves and coyotes and stuff? These giants weren't stupid, but they were lazy. So through selective breeding, genetic manipulation not required, alien intervention not required, just the same way that Mendel breeded peas, the human race was created as slaves, pets, entertainers, court jesters. Jump through the hoop, Fido, like that. Dig up the gold, Fido. And worship of the gods was invented by the slaves themselves. Yes, this is my deep end theory on the origin of religion. Why people worship gods, which to me has never made any sense whatsoever ever since I was like 0 years old. As soon as I was old enough to figure out why we had to put on our fancy clothes and go to church and sit there on this hard wooden bench for an hour or two, worshiping gods never made any sense to me until I figured this out. We were slaves. We were not worshiping gods. We were worshiping the king, the lord, the landlord, the giant, the big guy, for practical reasons. So we wouldn't be the next dinner of the pet dragon. I'm not going to try to prove this, but personally, I find it more believable than to assume that the ancients were motivated somehow to invent superior beings to worship. It still doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not even an atheist. I'm more like a radical pseudo-Buddhist or something. I don't believe in objective reality, let's say. But I do believe in physical reality, and let's not get into that right now. I'm not really an atheist. I'm closer to Hinduism or Buddhism than I am to atheism. Conjecture is conjecture, even when done by scientists. I feel very free to engage in conjecture of my own, seeing as how so-called scientists feel very free to ignore any evidence that doesn't fit their preconceived and somewhat profitable consensus beliefs. But let me repeat my main point. Conjecture doesn't prove or disprove anything. We should be digging things up, not just trying to prove and disprove theories that will never be proven and disproven unless we dig things up. Thanks for showing up. This here's Professor UD Guru, and I'll see you in the next movie. Bye-bye.